Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto can't outrun Shikamaru. They say the only thing to fear is fear itself. That, and a motivated Nara. Shikamaru is born with his father's intelligence and his mother's work ethic. The world is turned sideways. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 1, Prologue. Shikaku. Why are you always like this? Like what? You know what I'm talking about, Shikaku. Lazy, lazy, lazy. I'm willing to put up with your limp sack of meal attitude, but I will not allow you to impede Shikamaru in the same way. I would never block Shikamaru from. Then why are you so against his? My father shot out of his chair, his warped, twisting shadow towering over my mother and stretching across the whole kitchen, and for once, my mother, who I had always regarded as the more forceful of the two, was at a loss for words. I had never seen him look so angry before. Hell, I had never even seen him angry in any manner before, ever. Annoyed, yes, but the only indication he ever gave to being annoyed was just to shove a pillow over his own head and roll over. That, I could deal with. But this man was something else entirely, something I could not, for all my expanded 6-year-old vocabulary, figure out how to describe. What I did know was that this being was clearly dangerous, and at that moment, my apparently genius mind finally grasped the true meaning of a shinobi. Somewhere underneath his sleepy attitude, the man who had killed his way to survival through a whole entire shinobi world war was finally resurfacing, scars and all. The deep streak running down his face, the lumpy layer of skin that I always used to have fun poking at as a baby while he chuckled, that was nothing compared to the scores of pain that radiated from his eyes now. I had never been so scared in all my 6-year-old life. One thing was for sure, I knew from that point on, that while I could anger my mother all I wanted and get away with little more than a relatively painless scolding, and a few minutes in the corner, driving my father to his breaking point was a very unwise course of action and most likely the last one I would ever take. There were things to be said about the fury of a patient man. My mother's face was frozen, pale white against the flickering lamp, she could not speak. I was still hiding behind the wall separating the kitchen from the living room. They had not noticed me yet, my parents were so caught up in their argument, and anyway, I was a Nara. Unlike most children, I was not afraid of the darkness, rather, I loved it for the cover and peacefulness it could provide. I was prone to a disposition of the shadows, and I had always been good at hiding. Besides that, I was so small already, even compared to other children my age, and my chakra reserves were still so little, that it was likely my presence had faded in with the increasingly flaring aura of my father's. With every word he spoke, his anger became greater, and so the dark cloud of energy around him grew, working himself into a frenzy that I never thought he was capable of. My father, such a solemn, quiet, calm man, and this person in our kitchen right now, yelling at my mother, could not possibly be the same person. And yet he was. The pictures on our family shrine were rattling alongside his rumbling voice and glowing chakra now. I imagined my two-dimensional family ancestors with their glossy photographed eyes behind the glass panes and carven frames shaking with just as much terror as I was. If father could hear their trembling over the sound of his own yelling, he didn't seem to care. The three Sannin, one a wayward pervert, one a hedonistic drunk, and one in kami knows where, rendered so completely inhuman by his own genius. With each sentence, his voice rose exponentially. The fourth Hokage, praise, greatness, bestowed with so many nicknames and titles he'd drown in ink writing them all down. And for what? Dead before he even hit 30. He just kept going and going and going and would not stop. Kakashi Hatake, so completely screwed up in the head that it's not even funny, and don't give me that look, Yoshino, you and I both know that it's true, that poor man is the worst head case anyone who knows anything about psychology will ever see short of insanity itself. Who wouldn't be when you've spent your whole life since you could walk risking your life for a village that only saw to smash everything and everyone you've ever cared about to pieces? That's why he wears 10 masks on. top of each other and evades every personal question like oil evades water and reads that Ika filth in public and purposely arrives late to everything and spends hours and hours upon hours standing outside in the sun, the rain, the snow, whatever in front of that accursed stone, and fucks around with people's minds like he doesn't even care every chance he gets, because it's such an obvious coping mechanism to deal with all the shit life has dealt him, and no one, not even Inoichi Yamanaka, can do anything about it. My mother didn't cry. She had never waited for any man to come and rescue her. Everything she had ever accomplished, from her first mission to grabbing my father's attention, had been entirely of her own merit. So why was there all this water running down her cheeks now? Shikaku, please. My father did not hear her, and just kept mercilessly listing every single predecessor of the Konoha prodigy's legacy, until, finally, he punctuated his argument with such a great volume that I wondered why the whole village hadn't awoken and come by our house to see what was going on already. Maybe it was because they knew that when the noise was coming from Shikaku Nara's home of all places, it was best to stay away. Do you want me to get started on the brilliant, undefeatable, infamous Itachi Uchiha, Genin at 7, Chunin at 8, and already murdering grown men in their beds as an ANBU captain when he was but 13? Completely snapped and gone mad, leaving his beloved younger brother to pick up the pieces. But I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. Oh no, send a little kid out to snap his first neck and slice his first jugulars before his age has even exited the single digits. Everything will be fine, won't it? I'm surprised he didn't try pulling some stunt like this earlier. Just think, Yoshino. His entire family, the largest clan in all of Konoha, murdered, slaughtered in cold blood, reduced from over 100 men to only 2, in one night. I was there, Yoshino. I was one of the original people called in for the initial investigation after the Uchiha massacre was over, and do you know what I saw? An entire waterfall of blood, running down the front steps and spilling out into the boulevard beyond. And you know what else I saw? Itachi Uchiha's footprints in the sea of red. And not a single one was smudged or pooled. He did not hesitate nor did he run out of there. He walked calmly and coolly as one might stroll through the park on a happy and bright summer's day as if nothing was wrong. Shikaku. And then the anger broke, and the beast was gone, replaced by a man seemingly too old to be my grandfather. Aged, not only with wisdom, but with pain. His yelling had ceased, replaced with something slow and sorrowful instead. And yet it was these sentiments, born, once again, of a beast different from my father this time, another beast of fear rather than anger, that terrified me more than any of his fury. Even years from now, when I would be confronted with enemies, my memory would revert to this one moment, and I would remember his painful sighs. Oh, what next, Yoshino? What fate are we to assign this next one? Shall we make him Shikamaru Nara, the boogeyman himself? The cautionary tale to all future generations of our clan, about he who treaded in the shadows for so long that he ended up becoming one of them himself. My mother did not say a word. I did not, either. I simply sat frozen, unable to even breathe, as I watched the dark silhouettes on the wall curl into a most familiar shape. Me. Let me explain my story from the beginning. My name is Shikamaru Nara, as you may have deduced. I am the son of Shikaku Nara and Yoshino Nara, formerly Yoshino - of an insignificant bloodline, and heir to the Nara clan of Kanehagakure no Sato. I am an only child, though I probably have some distant cousins from my mother's side living elsewhere. I won't be speaking of them much, which I think will suit them well, as they are civilians who would prefer a peaceful and quiet life far away from all the treachery and cruelties of the shinobi sphere. I do not blame them for this take on life, and I don't think they will be very offended at me, either, when I say that I consider my comrades at arms more of my brothers and sisters than blood will ever be. Blood traits seem to run strongly in shinobi families. Take me, for instance. At first glance I am exactly like my father. The spiky, dark hair, the lazy, hooded eyes, the shapes of our faces and noses, the facial expressions we make in every situation, the uncanny intelligence only befitting of a Nara, even our usual habits, from how we yawn to the way we tend to roll our eyes in exasperation, coincide exactly, though that might be more due to how I was raised. Children, after all, do imitate their parents, than genetics. But for the academy teachers who were unfortunate enough to suffer through more than one generation of my family, aunts and uncles and distant cousins included, they will tell you right away that in my heart I am my mother. It is said, sometimes affectionately, and sometimes in complaint, that the Nara suffer an affliction of too much een. From our minds to our bodies, and even in the signature shadow techniques that we use, we are the quiet, pondering types, intelligent, but not prone to action. Too intelligent, perhaps, and so nature had to balance out the playing field by reducing something else of ours. At least, that was how it was, until I came along. Hokage-sama blames my mother. He never says it out loud, but I can tell, because every time my father decides to participate in Konoha Command Central's Take Your Child to Work Day, the Sandaime will furrow his old brows and pinch the bridge of his nose and sigh a quiet "Oh, Shikaku, why did you marry her of all people?" each time he lays his eyes on me. Of course, it was said in jest, not actual anger, so maybe I shouldn't complain so much. My mother was not a Nara by birth, although she definitely looks the part. She too has that rather oval face so prominently displayed when her hair is pulled back. But that is neither here or there. She came from a civilian family. Perhaps I had a grandfather who was a genin on her side, I do not know, and thus she had to fight and claw and scream her way up to her rank as chunin, among the rest of her average peers, unlike those special teams composed solely of clan children, speaking of which, pretty much every heir to every clan that matters happens to be in my year. She probably could have made it further, but then I was born, and so she retired. That is, on paper. In spirit she has always remained a shinobi, and every morning without fail she proves it by faithfully dragging me out of bed at the crack of dawn to do our exercises. She gave up on trying to get my father to wake up that early long ago, because by the time she finally manages to get him out of bed the allotted time is already over anyway. Although, she still nags at him once he's finally awake. Had I been my father, she would have given up on both of us. But I was not like my father. I was my mother, and for once, the een of the Nara were balanced out with the young of my mother, new, fresh blood, born from the natural social injustice of the established clan system, bred out of nothing but sheer will and determination, hot and eager and ready for action. Yes, I was born with my father's brain, but I had my mother's heart, a heart carved out from the trials and tribulations, not only of shinobi life, but of the shinobi political world in general, with little more than an average instructor, a mediocre family name, and all of her courage and fierceness. I started the academy at the age of 6 or so, just like everyone else in my year. And at first, the difference between my classmates and me hadn't really been that bad or obvious. The first few days were mostly theory, so the civilian-born children at least wouldn't kill themselves when they finally tried to pick up a kunai the wrong way. So I didn't have much opportunity for demonstration other than answering basic questions. Sure, I got them right, but so did most of the other kids who had bothered to crack open a textbook the day before. Even one of the civilian-born girls, Sakura Haruno, could answer those types of questions perfectly. Even after the basic training finally started, I seemed perfectly normal compared to the other clan children. Sure, thanks to my practice sessions with my mother, I could throw my weapons and execute all my katas perfectly, and rank relatively high in spars, but that was to be expected from someone of my background. There were many other students, like my friends Ino Yamanaka and Choji Akimichi, who had also received clan upbringings and therefore did just as well. Our class that year had had the most number of clan children for a long time, and all of us happened to be clan heirs. Something like this must have been planned, since to me there was no way this could happen at random, but I said nothing since it was a useless fact anyway, and my father always told me to never waste time on useless facts. The point was, for the first few weeks, there was very little to distinguish me from the rest of my classmates, especially since a third of the class was working with the same advantages I had. In fact, had it not been known that I was a Nara who didn't spend half the day napping, I would have been one of the less significant clan heirs, classified right in that same group that Shino Aburame was in, given that there existed kids like Sasuke Uchiha and Kiba Inazaka, both of whom were much more prone to showing off than I was. But I couldn't hide forever. Though my father had tried his hardest to instill in me a strong sense of modesty, mostly through the doctrine that good shinobi should neither be seen nor heard, my mother had sort of cancelled that and ideal out with her own doctrine of always trying your best and giving everything your all. Given my natural-born intelligence, that meant I had a lot to give. In the end, that had ended up manifesting itself in a compromise. I never volunteered to do more than was asked of me, unlike Sasuke, who took to demonstrating complicated taijutsu takedowns in front of the instructors with every chance he got, but everything that was asked of me was finished in such a way that proved beyond any reasonable doubt that I was clearly capable of much more than what I was showing. So, I fulfilled both of my ends of the bargain. I had 75% of my abilities, just as my father wanted me to, but damn if I hadn't held back on the other 25%. Looking back, perhaps that was done as much out of my own selfishness as it was out of my obedience to my parents' principles of becoming a good shinobi. I, like any other child, wanted to be recognized for my own brilliance. It was my own little backhanded way of showing off. Of course, at the age of 6, one does not really think of the reality of the moral implications of one's actions. I had simply convinced myself that I was doing the right thing, no selfishness involved whatsoever, because all the adults around me believed so. My dad got what he wanted, and my mom got what she wanted. End of story. It was halfway through the first semester when the signs that I was more than simply different started showing. Every written test, I always finished first and always got a perfect score. Not just 1 or 2 minutes ahead of the next person, either. Sometimes the difference was as much as half an hour, depending on how much we had to write and how much shown work was demanded for the calculations. Multiple choice tests I could literally finish in seconds. A lot of these questions were common sense. If I didn't know the answer, I could easily reason it out. I will give myself the benefit of the doubt and say that I was not finishing quickly on purpose for the sake of proving my own superiority to my classmates, as most children would do, but rather to prove my own ego to myself and to my parents. I liked games, and so to me, every test was like a game, and my score was determined by how much time I had left. Besides, the more time I had left, the more time I would have to go outside to the academy playground and train by myself. I knew that sitting for a few more minutes to check my work would not help me any more than not checking my work, whereas exercising my muscles would. One of my father's many philosophies, after all, had been those born blessed with a superior mind must still work like anyone else to develop a superior body. And, as my mother's work ethic always taught me, take advantage of every second you've got, and so I did. My raw strength had been just the same as all the other students, but when it came to things like technique, how to most efficiently distribute power, I had an edge. I was a fast learner, a fast mover, and highly coordinated, and so physically I could deal out more damage than the rest of my friends even though we all were more or less on the same level strength-wise. And so, no matter how many shuriken Sasuke Uchiha, the runner-up, threw, no matter how many ANBU Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last, outran, the academy teachers soon pronounced that it would be impossible for anyone to catch up to me. Which wasn't true. I knew I was smart now, but if there was one thing my father warned me against, it was arrogance, because no man can control the future perfectly. But never mind that. Despite being Shikamaru Nara, I was still just a regular 6-year-old, and whatever words of wisdom my father came up with, they would surely be ignored in favor of so-called experience when they passed through my lips. And therein came the source of my parents' first, and, luckily, their last, argument. It had started innocently enough. At around the end of the first semester marking period, the academy instructors and some other Konoha officials had analyzed my scores, and, after realizing that they were leaps and bounds ahead of anyone else they had ever seen, including all of the child prodigies that had come before me, considered bumping me up a few classes. I was still young and naive then, for all of my intelligence. I had had no opinion on the matter at the time. I was just a kid. As long as I could still have my friends and praise from my parents and teachers, I was happy. Vaguely I knew that I was a smart and special kid, since everyone always told me that, but I couldn't exactly tell just how far apart I was from my classmates. When you're 6 years old, you are you and they are them. So, what if I had more gold stars than everyone else? Ino was Ino and Choji was Choji and Sasuke was Sasuke and Naruto was Naruto, and biologically speaking, your brain takes a while to fully develop its own sense of self. My mother, on the other hand, had been all for it. That was when my father stepped in and rescued me. No, he had said, and put down his foot firmly, and so even the Hokage, who had been wholly in favor of the idea, backed down. Just no. The nice thing about being a Nara was that no matter how quietly you talked, when you talked, and I mean actually speaking, not just complaining, people listened. But my mother was a Nara too, by name if not by birth, and she had had different ideas. A headstrong woman, she could not fathom why anyone wouldn't take such a grand opportunity when it was right in his face like so. That night, she had asked, well, demanded was a more appropriate word, seeing as this was my mother, to know just exactly why my father was halting my education. Of course, he had anticipated this question and had had an entire list prepared. And so, we come back to me, 6 years old, huddled up against the wall, hidden in the shadows, finally getting a glimpse of what the fate of a child like me might be. No child genius has ever had a nice life. Not in the shinobi world. Shikamaru can have fame and glory if he likes, but it will not be as a child prodigy. His life will be hard enough as an adult, in this line of work. Let him be happy while he can. My mother might be considered by many to be a bossy and overbearing woman, but never let it be said that she didn't know reason when she heard it. When the next day finally arrived, there was no more of that ridiculous talk, my father's words, not mine, of me graduating early. I would stay put where I was, with children my age, and grow up normally, or, I suppose, as normally as anyone could, being bombarded with all this war and desensitization propaganda at the age of 6 moving forward. Still, my mother managed to convince my father that he should help fuel my talent before it died out completely, since it was clear that I was becoming bored at school. That, my father could agree on. He didn't particularly care how far I advanced between ages 6 and 12, as long as I didn't put on the Konoha Hitaiate any earlier than that. I think in the ideal world for him, children wouldn't formally complete their education until they were at least 18, but when they finally did, we'd be pumping out students no less than Jonin level. For him, one did not become a Chunin after one passed the Chunin exams, one should already be high Chunin level walking into that thing. No point in taking a potentially lethal test only to fail, or worse die. I suppose this arrangement ended up being all the better for me. I had friends in my class, Choji and Ino from before the academy days, though more Choji than Ino, who liked to play with the other girls too, and I didn't want to leave them. Even if Sasuke had a habit of sulking and being moody for no apparent reason, and Naruto and Kiba were a bit on the boisterous side, they were still my friends. Anyway, my teachers were knowledgeable of my situation too, as they were the ones who had brought up the whole skip 6 grades idea to my father and the Hokage in the first place, and usually let me do my own work while they helped the rest of the class on a concept that I had mastered a long time ago. Plus, at night, unlike the rest of my friends, I got to stay up late, sometimes even past 12, sitting around a bonfire with my father and watching the light and shadow flicker around on the ground. My childhood was a quite pleasant one, apart from the regular trials and tribulations of children. But time flies so quickly, and soon I was looking at my own reflection on my polished forehead protector, wondering when I turned 12. Maybe that was why my father liked to take things so slowly. But I never forgot my father's boogeyman, and all throughout my life, his words that he didn't even know I had heard, would haunt me. Those who walk the shadows may very well become one with them. Chapter 2, The Desk Chunin's Lament. The night after graduation. The Konoha Shinobi Academy. Emergency post-year-end conference meeting. What the heck are we going to do? Irika Yumano whined, banging his head against the table. Naruto Uzumaki finally passed, so now at least you won't have to deal with a two-man team, Genma mentioned unhelpfully. Especially since he had been the one to pass the little squirt in the first place. God, what had he been thinking? Oh right. The multi-shadow clone technique. Damn. This is the most dysfunctional graduating class I've ever had, Irika groaned. I can't put either Ino or Sakura or any of the girls with Sasuke. I've seen the way they run after him in class, and that's just cruel. Not to mention it would cause a highly disruptive team dynamic, and we can't have anyone getting hurt just because someone was too busy ogling someone else, but then we have to have one girl on each team. It's a perfect fit this year. 9 girls, 18 boys. That's a 2-to-1 ratio, and we can't mess it up, or the teams will be unbalanced. People will complain. More like you will complain, Mr. OCD, Genma muttered under his breath. What was that? Nothing. What about Hinata Hyuga? She's quiet. I don't think I've seen her run around after Sasuke like the other girls do, Daikoko suggested. That seemed to placate Irika somewhat, and he drew a line between Sasuke Uchiha and Hinata Hyuga. But wait, that's 2 dojutsu wielders on the same team, won't that be unfair? What choice do we have? Daikoko asked. If it's as you say, then this is the best solution. Would you rather put the last Uchiha with Hinata Hyuga, or some rabid fangirl? Right. He had a point there. Anyway, the other teams would end up with clan heirs too. This entire year was full of clan heirs. What the hell were they all thinking, getting their wives pregnant all at the exact same time? Good God! It was a conspiracy. Irika sighed. That still leaves the whole class genius/dead last issue. In an ideal situation, we're supposed to put Naruto Uzumaki on Sasuke Uchiha's team, and make them our frontline combat team. That's how it's always done. But this year, our Nara student was actually willing to pick up his pencil to take his tests. There was a sarcastic giggle among the crowd of shinobi, which Irika ignored, so's at the top of the class instead. Which means we can't have a repeat of the Ino Shikacho trio, which is a shame, because that's the most successful capture and interrogation team format we've had, ever. But we can't put Naruto with anyone but Shikamaru, because, once again, we have to make things fair. We could try to preserve Ino Shikacho, but that might lead to that whole team imbalance issue again. Which one's more important? I'd say team balance over Ino Shikacho, Aoba said, pushing up his glasses with his pinky. It's not the end of the world. Shikamaru will be good for Naruto. He's intelligent and responsible, but he also has a rather even temper. He's one of the few people who doesn't make fun of the kid, apart from Choji and Shino. If you put him with Sasuke, they do nothing but fight all the time. You'll notice that even though Shikamaru's at the top of the class, it's Sasuke who Naruto picks fights with all the time. I guess that works. Irika sighed. So that leaves the other ladies. Sakura and Ino. I'd advise against putting Sakura on Naruto's team. Naruto has a crush on Sakura, but Sakura absolutely hates Naruto. She can be very cutting with her words, and sometimes she hits him. It would disrupt team dynamics very badly, Suzume said. Ino is a childhood friend of Shikamaru, and while she doesn't like Naruto at all that much, she can tolerate him much better than Sakura would. Anyway, you've got 2/3 of Ino Shikacho there. Naruto is no Akimichi, but with the right training he might grow up to be a decent brawler, which would fit that particular role in this team combination. It'll be good for the kids to take a step away from their parents anyway. It'd be a different thing if Ino Shikacho was something running for multiple generations, but that had only been once. No need to start tradition and doom the rest of their grandkids to the same team for the rest of their lives. Don't you feel a little bad, cutting Choji out of the equation, though? Oh? Jinma asked, taking the senbon out of his mouth. Then he shrugged. Whatever. You're the one delivering the list to the Hokage, not me. He can talk to the Akimichi if they raise any questions. I guess we'll put Choji with Sasuke and Hinata? Irika asked. Choji has a pretty even temper too. He'll be good for Sasuke. That boy raised some major red flags on his last psych report, by the way. Which leaves Shino and Kiba with Sakura. That's as fair as I can make it. All the other teams will stay as is. Sounds good, Suzume said. So now, traditionally the class genius/dead last combination goes to the frontline battle team, but this year that's our capture and interrogation team. Frontline battle will have to be Sasuke, Hinata, and Choji, which is good. They're all well suited for that fact since they have strong taijutsu backgrounds. And then the intel team will do well with just Shino and Kiba. Sadly, Sakura doesn't have any dojutsu, but if we put that team with Kurenai Yuhi, she might be able to pass on a few genjutsu or two. Irika hastily scribbled down the suggestions. God, he was getting too old for this. So what if he was only 22? They didn't pay him enough for this sort of stress, damn it. He deserved a good night's rest after the Mizuki incident, but no, he just had to go and promote Naruto, meaning that all of this team assignment business had to be scrapped and thrown back together from scratch. Stupid him. Sakura is a natural at chakra control. Yes, that would be a good fit. But what of the other two teams? 7 and 10? Daikoko mumbled, tapping his chin. We can't fail any of those three teams, 7, 8 and 10. They're all of the clan children, for Kami's sake. We'll have to put Sasuke with Kakashi, since he's the only Sharingan wielder left, but then the class genius/dead last combination is traditionally taught by a member of the previous team 7, but then this year it's a little different, since our frontline team no longer fits that qualification. But Hatake always fails all of his teams, Genma pointed out. You know, that whole entire teamwork test dating back to the first Hokage? He what? Irika asked. He's failed every single team he's ever gotten because none of them could work together, Genma said. Well, that's an issue, Irika mumbled. Sasuke's biggest problem is working in a team. We can't just fail the last Uchiha, Suzume said. We could put Ino Shikamaru with him and see how it works out. Aoba suggested. I mean, if any team is going to work together well enough to pass that test, it has got to be them. Naruto isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, if you know what I mean, but Shikamaru and Ino will be able to pull him through, and they know plenty about teamwork. Kakashi's got to get a team sooner or later. We can't let a guy as overpowered as he is go through his whole life without getting even one student. Plus, Hatake's a former ANBU. I'd say he's more qualified to teach a tracker/retrieval team than Asuma. Asuma's always been more fit for frontline fighting anyway. But the whole Sharingan thing, arf. Irika threw down his pen in frustration. Look, Sasuke doesn't have a Sharingan yet. When he finally develops it, we'll just make Hatake tutor him in private, if need be. That way there's no accusations of favoritism within a team, Aoba said. Problem solved. Anyway, most Uchihas didn't really need someone to teach them to use their eyes. They all just kind of figured it out themselves, right? I think Sasuke will be fine, regardless of if he has someone to teach him how to use his eyes or not. Right now, his biggest problem is teamwork, and Asuma's supposed to be good with that, yes? Irika rubbed his head. Fine. Team 10 goes to Asuma, and Team 7 goes to Kakashi. Anything else? Because I swear to God. Good thing that worked out, Genma grinned, because I actually overheard Hatake telling the Hokage, well, demanding, more like, that he wanted the Uzumaki kid on his team. What? That Uzumaki? Suzume gasped. There's only one, Genma shrugged. Whoa. Stop right there. You said he wanted Naruto Uzumaki on his team? Why him of all people, though? Suzume asked. You'd think he'd be begging for someone else closer to his level, like Shikamaru or Sasuke. Naruto, really? Why? Beats me, Genma shrugged. This is just hearsay. I don't know the whole context. Apparently everything anyone knows about that guy is solely between him and Sandaime-sama. All I know is that for some reason he wants to have a chance to test Naruto, and he won't stand for it otherwise. And you know what? The Hokage actually gave in. Well, not really, since he said it was up to the academy teachers to assign teams and teachers, but he also implied that he'd turn a blind eye to whatever other strings he might pull in order to get, the kid on his team. And Hitaki has his hands wrapped around a lot of strings, believe me. And you never saw fit to tell me that we might have to start over just to appease this jerkass until after we assigned these teams? Irika exploded. Can he really do something like that? Demand certain students? Formally, I don't think so, but this is Kakashi Hitaki we're talking about. That guy can passive-aggressive bitch his way out of anything. You don't think it's because of the you-know-what? That would be a good reason to run away, not get even closer. Remember though, this is Kakashi Hitaki. He's messed up enough as it is. Isn't that what weirdos like him do? Go running after danger? Sides, the kid's not that dangerous, really, barring the whole pranking people thing. Alright, already. Enough. Irika yelled over the din, picking up the pen and rewriting the final draft of the team list. Here's the last edition, and no more edits, or I swear to God I will find you and murder you in your sleep, ahem. Anyway, Team 1 will be Team 7, Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Naruto Uzumaki, under Kakashi Hitaki. Team 8, Shino Aburame, Sakura Haruno, and Kiba Inazaka. Your sensei will be Kurinai Yuhi. Team 10, Sasuke Uchiha, Hinata Hyuga, and Choji Akimichi, and you will be working with Asuma Sarutobi. Irika threw down the clipboard in finality, completely ignoring the outraged gasps of all the girls who didn't get to be with their precious Sasuke-kun. He had wasted too many hours of sleep trying to make these team assignments perfect, damn it, and he was not going to go back and fix any of it just to placate some whiny preteens. Irika-sensei, why can't I be with Sasuke-kun? Because I already wasted too many hours of sleep trying to make these team assignments perfect, damn it, and I am not going to go back and fix any of it just to placate some whiny preteens. He yelled. Stunned silence. Ha! For once they finally all shut up. He cleared his throat. That's it for today, folks. Your new teachers will meet with you after the lunch break. I'll have a rooms list posted on the doors by then. He neglected to tell them that 2/3 of them would probably be destined for cannon fodder oblivion instead of actually training to be an elite team underneath some famed jonin, but oh well. Some things in the shinobi world had to be learned the hard way, and this was just the beginning. Kakashi Hitaki was having a good day. A very good day. He was about to meet 3 new cute little genin, as Sandaime-sama made him do every year, nice and impressionable and perfect for terrorizing. As Ibiki always made clear, words were as much of a weapon as any steel blade, and it was amazing what a few words here or there could do to supposedly train ninja. Then he remembered that this year, of the 3 kids he was stuck with, or rather, they were stuck with him, if they passed, the first was a certified genius, the second was the sole heir to a clan of mind readers, and the third was the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox and his dead sensei's son to boot. On second thought, maybe this lot might be more difficult to fool than the others. A shame he hadn't gotten Obito's 4th, 5th, 8th cousin too, but maybe that was for the best. From Sasuke's psych evaluation, the boy would have been a massive pain in the posterior to deal with. It was scarily similar to his own when he had been at the same age actually. Now, he was still just as messed up, but at least he knew how to deal with it better, with smiles both real and false at the few people he dared to let into his sadly limited friendship circle. Perhaps that was why it was a bad idea, they were too similar, and that definitely wouldn't work out. The boy could learn a thing or two from a mellow guy like Asuma. Kakashi shuddered to think at how he might have turned out, if he had landed a sensei as cold-hearted as he was, say, Orochimaru, instead of bright and smiling never-angry Minato Namikaze. Oh well. No time to think depressing thoughts right now. He was about to meet some rather sensitive youngsters, and apparently you weren't supposed to scare them with stories of death or PTSD until after it was already too late for them to quit. He wondered how they would deal when the time finally came. You're late. Oh, was he? He was supposed to meet them at, When did they say he was supposed to meet them? He actually didn't remember. The girl, Yamanaka's daughter, Ino, was the one yelling. Shikamaru Nara was just giving him a quiet, vaguely disappointed look, the same one Shikaku Nara often gave to the desk chunin when he thought that they were being particularly exasperating or stupid. And Naruto was unusually quiet. He was trapped in Shikamaru's shadow. That explained things. He was just about to prank you for being late. Shikamaru somehow managed to explain calmly, while clearly demonstrating just exactly how pissed off he was. Good. Kakashi was very fond of pissing people off. Something with the eraser. Booby trap. Naruto insisted. It's called a booby trap. And I was just testing him. If he fell for something like that, it would be on purpose, Shikamaru sighed, slowly letting go of Naruto. Shit. Tricking these kids would be harder than he thought. No need for that sort of behavior right now, he waved a hand airily. Meet me up on the roof in 5, yes? It would take them longer than 5 minutes to get up to the roof, he knew. He always asked his teams to meet him in this particular room because the stairs to the roof were on the other side of the school building. Unless they already knew Shunshin. We climbed up the side of the building, Shikamaru explained, swinging a leg over the side of the railing. The stairs were too far away to make it in 5 minutes. Unless you planned this? Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Climbed? I did, because I'm that awesome. Naruto yelled, jumping over and leaving a shaking tree in his wake. But I think those two cheated. They had tape or something on their hands. He started to brush the twigs and leaves out of his hair. Chakra, Ino said. Naruto paused, one hand halfway to his sandal, where several leaves had embedded themselves underneath his toes. What's that? You don't know what chakra is? Ino slumped, one eyebrow raised exasperatedly. Kakashi leaned forward, pinched the bridge of his nose. Oh, sensei, have mercy on my soul. It's that stuff. Naruto made vague waving motions with his hands, right? Ino dropped her face into her hands. Spiritual energy. It's the spiritual energy that all shinobi have. It's what you use to do jutsu. You'd know if you actually showed up to class instead of ditching school and playing pranks. Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. I guess that's one thing we'll have to teach him ASAP, Shikamaru shrugged. Oh, good. They're thinking as a team already. Ino looked ready to cry, but she didn't say anything. She didn't seem to begrudge Naruto for not knowing how to chakra walk. No one except for clan children learned before graduating from the academy, although they should, in Kakashi's very justified opinion. As much as the fact that he didn't know what chakra even was. Kakashi didn't blame her. In the exact same situation, he would have been 10 times worse. Obito, at the very least, had a passable knowledge of the academy curriculum. He was just clumsy. Also, he had that annoying habit of thinking with his heart instead of his head. But at least he knew what chakra was. Yeah, but what is chakra? Naruto scratched his head. Naruto, I just told you. Ino screeched. I know that, Naruto said, but what is it? 'Cause, you know, how fire is, well, fire, and then Iruka-sensei said something about the sun's rays being electromagnetic or whatever. Electromagnetic radiation, Shikamaru supplied. Yeah, that, Naruto said. And then when you drop an apple, that's gravity, and then when I kick something, that's, mechanical energy. Sure. Whatever. And then chemicals are like chemical energy, right? So what's chakra? Shikamaru blinked. Once. Twice. Even Ino, Screechy, as he had privately nicknamed her, seemed at a loss for words. Kakashi, on the other hand, had an answer ready. Chakra, my dear student, is chakratic energy. They all blinked at him. What? You just pulled that answer out of your ass, didn't you?" Ino deadpanned. Kakashi chose to respond to that by changing the subject. "Right, so, I'm sure you all already know who I am, so how about you introduce yourselves, since I don't really know much about any of you." "What do you want us to tell you?" Ino asked. "How about you tell us what you already know about us, and we'll fill in the gaps," Shikamaru suggested. "But I don't know anything about you," Kakashi said. "You probably already know our names, heights and weights, grades, and that sort of thing from the academy files. They give those to you, right?" Shikamaru asked. "And you kind of know our personalities, too, from that earlier interaction. What else have you deduced about us?" "Humor me," Kakashi grinned. "Except no one could really see it underneath the mask." Ino narrowed her eyes. "Why don't you go first? You look kind of sketchy." "Him? Sketchy? Really?" "Ah, well, he supposed so. People often told him he looked like some sort of burglar. Except that the clever ones normally didn't wear masks and actually liked to rob houses in the middle of the day, while posing as delivery men and such instead of actual, well, burglars. He should know, he had been on quite a few lockpicking missions." "My name is Kakashi Hatake," he drawled. "I like some things. I dislike some things." "What sort of things?" Shikamaru interrupted. "Stuff." "And what sort of stuff?" "Things." He silently giggled to himself. He could play this game for hours. He had played this game for hours, actually. With both Ibiki and Inoichi. And he had won too. Now that had been just incredible fun. Shikamaru glared at him, then sighed. "Go on." Boring." "Oh well. My hobbies? I have a few hobbies, I suppose. Dreams for the future? I don't feel like telling you that." "Right, your turn." Ino sighed. Ooh. Me first. Me first." Naruto bounced up and down, like an excited puppy. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I like cup ramen. I dislike the 3 minutes you have to wait while the ramen cooks. I dream to be the next Hokage. And my hobbies are," he trailed off, pausing. "Pranks, I guess." Ino gave him the look. One that said, "Did you really just give out all this personal information to the same guy that refused to tell you anything?" "We can sit here all day," Kakashi said, "or you guys can be smart like him, and just get it over with." "I don't think it's fair that you're not telling us anything." Ino protested. "Look, I know you're a Jonin and I'm a Genin, but we're all Konoha shinobi on the same team, and my dad always said that teammates should know each other. And if you're not going to give us anything about you then, that's not fair." She repeated. Kakashi rolled his eyes. "Look. I did tell you the truth. At this point in my career, I don't have very many likes, dislikes, hobbies, or dreams for the future, unless you count staying alive and hoping that another secret war doesn't break out," he told her cheerfully, injecting as much sarcasm into his words as possible. "Anyway, while you're technically legal adults, capable of making your own decisions as shinobi of Konoha, you're still not allowed to drink or do other special things until you're older. So I can't tell you about any of that, or the Hokage will call me in and lecture me and give me a slap on the wrist, and I really don't like getting slapped on the wrist. So go ahead. Tell me about what you do for fun. Maybe I'm looking for suggestions for self-improvement, and so far I don't think pranks is proper behavior for someone of my rank." At this, both Ino and Shikamaru raised their eyebrows at him dubiously. Evidently, their parents had told them many a horror story about the fearsome Kakashi Hatake, scourge of the desk Chunin everywhere. "And if they were, they'd be subtle enough that everyone knew it was me, but no one would be able to prove it," he added. "All right," the girl sighed, giving in. "I'm Ino Yamanaka. I like. Insert blush. My friends. And I dislike bullies and." Her eyes narrowed, "people who abandon their friends." Kakashi raised an eyebrow, before remembering the notes in her file. Used to be best friends with Sakura Haruno, Team 8, then suddenly became bitter enemies starting 6th year. Linked to Sasuke Uchiha, Team 10, suspected. Keep all three of them away from each other until they've finished puberty. Her fists unclenched. My hobbies are reading and arranging flowers and keeping up with the latest fashions. And I don't know exactly what I want to do yet, but I hope to be like my dad. Better, even. And I'm Shikamaru Nara. I like the weather here. I dislike it when people are ridiculously late and waste others' time. Kakashi's grin underneath his mask grew even wider at that. As for hobbies, I like to read and play board games with my dad. And I don't know what I want to do in the future, either, but I suppose it'll be like my dad too. Well, excellent, Kakashi clapped his hands together. You have your own distinct interests and personalities. Now, I've got some good news and some bad news. Bad news first. Always bad news first. Ino exclaimed. Right. Well, I have to tell you that of the 27 that made it out of the academy, only 9 actually become genin, at the discretion of their instructor, who is to give them all a second exam. What? Ino shrieked. God, she was loud. Then what was the final exam for? Kakashi leaned his head on his hand. That was to sort out the kids who actually had a chance of passing. Basic skills and such. I get to decide if I want you as my students or not. When you say 9 out of 27, Shikamaru asked, do you mean 9 out of 27, or 3 teams of 3 out of 9 teams of 3? Because I distinctly remember Irika-sensei complaining that he had spent an inordinate amount of effort trying to balance all the teams out, and that there was no way he was going to do any of that again, so. And there went the whole premise of his test. Damn, that kid was inconveniently clever. Stupid Naras. He chose to respond to that statement with one of his so-called infuriating half-smiles. Oi, sensei. What's the good news, then? Naruto yelled. Oh, that. You won't have to take that test until tomorrow. 5 a.m. at Training Ground 3. Don't eat breakfast, you'll throw up. Sweet dreams, everyone. And he popped out of their sight, the indignant screams of the Yamanaka girl still ringing in his sensitive ears. He so loved getting people angry. Chapter 3, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Training Ground 3, at approximately 5 a.m. Give or take a few hours. And whoever doesn't get a bell simply has to go back to the academy. Simple as that. Naruto and Ino looked horrified, but I knew better. I knew he was bluffing. It was against the rules to break up a team once it had been formed. A team passed and failed together, that was how Konoha operated. Either he passed us all and took us as his students, or he failed us all. Now, I didn't know how much leverage my father had over someone like Kakashi Hatake, even if he was the Jonin commander, because from his many stories over the dinner table, that was a man who seemed to dance to his own tune. So perhaps he might just fail us all, and damn the consequences. The Nara and the Yamanaka were rather minor clans compared to the Big Four, and, according to my dad, while Kakashi Hatake wasn't powerful enough to change tradition dating back to the time of the Shodaime all on his own, he had had enough standing as an individual at the age of 13 to face down even the whole Uchiha clan in its entirety before they were all massacred a few years back. I supposed it made sense. The Uchiha wouldn't have given up one of their precious eyes without a fight. I'm not sure how he got it, Dad wouldn't tell me, because it was his story to tell, not mine, but I at least knew that he had one. Ninja weren't especially creative with names, and it didn't take a genius to figure out the reason behind the whole Sharingan no Kakashi or Kakashi the Kopinin shebang. One thing was for sure, if he passed the three of us, it wouldn't be because of our last names. I doubted he'd stoop to using the Sharingan for 3 genin though. Even if we were good. There were certain perks that came from having the Jonin commander for your father, and knowing the good gossip about everyone that mattered was one of them. According to him, Kakashi Hatake had a rather massive reputation, but his supposedly infamous combat skills only made up about 1/10 of it. "So, what's the rest of it?" I had asked him. His only answer had been to shake his head pityingly at me and say nothing more. Which only meant that I'd have to go to the next best source for dirt, Ino. Ino, at least, had better luck with her own dad, mainly because, like Ino, Inoichi Yamanaka was the central hub of gossip in his own generation. And Ino's dad, unlike mine, had been all too willing to complain about this Kakashi Hatake person. "Oh, that guy? He's the biggest troll I've ever met and, yep, that about sums it up." Well, maybe not. But at least we now knew that we were dealing with a head case for a prospective Jonin sensei. Something I already learned from my parents' arguments 6 years ago. I didn't know how I felt about that. My future teacher being completely insane, I mean. Looking at the man standing in front of us now, still grinning with his one visible eye even though he was several hours late, I didn't doubt it. 5 in the morning, my ass. I was chasing after a rabbit for my breakfast cereal, yeah right. What a liar. I shouldn't have expected any different from him. We did have time to eat a nice breakfast while waiting for him though. So at least we hadn't fallen for that particular lie. Starving shinobi were poor shinobi, and thus I thanked Kami that I was born in a land where the climate and soil was good enough that we didn't have to import any of our food. Maybe he had done it on purpose? To give us a chance to scout out the terrain of the training ground while he was absent? We had done that. But was he really the type to do that? I guess they had to set some restrictions on how Jonin tested genin, though how closely those rules were followed was a mystery to me. Kakashi Hatake didn't seem like the type to follow the rules. He didn't seem like the type to be merciful just for the hell of it, either. Once again, the not knowing why he was late bothered me more than him actually being late, and that was saying something, because I take after my mother when it comes to my opinion on wasting time. He shook the bells at us tauntingly, and, as if in agreement, his little red alarm clock also tittered mockingly. Well, time waits for no one. It just moves on, a wealth that once is lost can't be earned back, my mother had always said. He was probably late just because he wanted to see if he could rile us up. Judging from Naruto's and Ino's still furious expressions, and mine too, he had been very successful in that, because all 3 of us hated him already. I stared at him again, trying to get any sort of reading from him. About half of what he had just told us wasn't true, and the other half was a total lie. I knew that. There wasn't much else I could discern from him, other than the fact that he really was completely batty, something already established multiple times in the past day. His clothes were too baggy for me to determine his body type and possible fighting style, whether or not this was on purpose or just laziness, and a general I don't care what other people think attitude on this part was also unknown to me, and his blank expression was so carefully crafted beneath his rage-inducing attitude that I might as well have been trying to create a psychological profile of a brick wall. A brick wall that had been decorated in the ugliest and most annoying migraine-inducing animated wallpaper ever known to man. I didn't know what that looked like, but if one could take Kakashi Hatake's personality and market it as wallpaper, that would be what it would look like. The real question was, should I call his bluff? Should I not? I should not. Even if I called his bluff, and told him exactly what I knew, something that Dad always said was dangerous, since knowledge, like bargaining chips, wasn't something you laid down flat in front of the enemy, he could still fail us all, and perhaps grade us even harder now that we knew the rules. Sometimes calling a bluff would allow an automatic pass, but that wouldn't be the case here. He was annoying to me because he was unreadable, not because he was stupid. Far from it. His infuriating smile was definitely hiding something, and yet I had no idea what it was. There was nothing I hated more than that half-state of knowing and yet not. The more experienced a Jonin was, the more messed up they were, and thus the more ruthless in their mind games. He was probably the type to try and trick us into doing something illegal, and if we pointed out that we knew, would make us do it anyway just to see if we wouldn't get caught. And when we did, he could point out that it was our fault entirely since we knew and did it anyway, and if we had just kept our mouths shut we'd at least be able to plead ignorance. Better to play dumb, until we knew a bit more about what he had in store. This was his game, with his rules, and so he had the advantage. When I was little, I would play a card game called Mao with my cousins and friends. Every once in a while, when it's not shogi or chess, my dad and I still play. The premise of the game is simple. You try to get rid of all of your cards, kind of like in Crazy Eights or Uno, but there are certain rules in how you can lay them down. The problem is, you don't know all of those rules. Only the current rule setter does. Break a rule, and you have to add cards to your hand. The rules can be anything as logical as the next card has to be of the same suit or number as the previous card, or anything as stupid as every time the girl closest to you goes, you have to say chicken ramen. The trick is to find out what all the rules are before you've gained too many cards. Here, it was the same. We were playing Mao against Kakashi Hatake. We knew the basic form of play, but not all of the rules. He did. We had to find those rules, or at least some of them, to even out the playing field. But we couldn't say anything. Not when Naruto still had his arm pinned behind his back, his own kunai pointed at the back of his head. Well then, Kakashi shrugged, releasing Naruto and attaching the bells to his belt. If you're ready, then, go. Not wasting any time, the three of us ran off to hide. Or, at least, Ino and I did. Naruto was still standing on top of the grassy knoll in all of his orange glory, yelling something about a fair fight. Naruto, I'm sorry, but shinobi and fair fight do not belong together in the same sentence. We'd have to correct Naruto's behavior, seeing as we'd be stuck with him, until we became Chunin and started to lead our own selves. Unless, of course, his current classification as a highly visible target was actually a trick to hide his true nature, but I doubted that. For now, his hot-headedness would serve as a semi-useful distraction to our target. Now was a good time to plan, when Kakashi was busy marveling at Naruto's orangeness. I felt a little bad, using Naruto to buy time for the rest of us without him knowing, but I had no other choice. I couldn't communicate with him if he was just standing there out in the open like that, and if we waited for Kakashi Hatake to finish up with Naruto, none of us would have any time left. Watching Kakashi Hatake versus Naruto Uzumaki was not pretty. To call it a fight would have been implying that Naruto even had a chance. I'd more accurately describe it as an entirely one-sided curb stomp. I was well aware that this wasn't even a Jonin's proper strength. I should know. My mother's a Chunin, and she never clowned around this much. Actually, on second thought, that was a bad example. Izumo and Kotetsu, at the front gate. There we go. They clowned around too, but even they wouldn't waste their time reading and fighting at the same time. That seemed like the ultimate way to insult Naruto, not considering him good enough to even give him your full and undivided attention, and yet somehow able to toy with him to such an extent anyway. Naruto was getting more and more riled up with each passing second as he was unable to land even a hit on Kakashi. And when he became riled up, his movements were even sloppier. And when his movements became sloppy, Kakashi would just rile him up even more. At least, this was a good thing for the rest of us. It meant that Kakashi Hatake was treating us like weak and powerless genin, instead of taking us seriously. Or at least, he was treating Naruto like a weak and powerless genin. He might be more wary of Ino and me since we had our clan techniques and extra training. Naruto. That's a tiger seal. Get out of there, you'll be killed. Oh no, Ino. Don't give away your position so easily. And, yep. Another bluff. All Naruto would suffer was a sore behind and some wounded pride, although my eyes nearly popped out of my head when his fingers actually connected. I took a few seconds to wrap my head around just how far Naruto was flying with that one poke. That had to be unreal, it really did. Even normal ninja would have trouble throwing a kunai that far. We were way out of our leagues here. That was definitely confirmed. High Chunin to low Jonin level taijutsu and my clan's secret techniques, that really was all I had. That, and some above-average weapon skills and minor genjutsu. And a few other things, but like my father always said, I didn't want to give them away so early. Ino might know some genjutsu, maybe. Her clan technique was not suitable for combat. But even if it was, it wouldn't work here. As far as her dad was concerned, don't bother with scanning the mind of someone like Hitaki. You won't like what you'll find in there. And on that note, certain names like the 3 Sannin and Itachi Uchiha are also brains to avoid. Off limits except to the highest level of A and BU training, got it? Ino, being Ino, had asked why. Because they were all out there slitting throats before the rest of their peers had even joined the academy, my dad had drawled in response. And that was that. So, we really didn't have much to go on. A few shuriken and kunai, the shadow possession jutsu and its derivatives, and solid clones? Maybe Naruto could be of some use after all. Nope. Now, he was dangling upside down from a tree. Meanwhile, here was a guy who could send us sailing with a single finger. Speaking of which, wasn't that something reserved for the likes of Lady Tsunade? My mind was racing a mile a minute. I had to think fast. Naruto was already out, meaning that Kakashi would be coming for Ino and me next. I had next to no time to plan. Kakashi was walking over to Naruto now, and was bending down to pick up the bells, which were still on the ground where he had left them as snare bait. I had already analyzed the strength of my teammates versus our opponent. Our chances didn't look good. No relying on super powerful techniques here. Our difference in intelligence was also questionable. Had it been anyone else, I might have rated myself as having a fair chance. But this was a jonin whose craftiness was more feared than his skill. I thanked my dad for always complaining about him. I might have underestimated him otherwise. Maybe. Moving on to terrain. This training ground was simple enough. Grass, 3 wooden posts, the memorial stone, the lunch boxes, the alarm clock. Not much going on over there, unless someone ran out of shuriken and decided that throwing rice and fish was the next best bet. What about the surrounding forest? That, I think, would be off limits to actual combat. Well, not officially. But I knew that Kakashi knew that hiding in the shadows when you had a Nara on the other side was tactical suicide. Which was good, that meant he'd have to stay in the clearing where we could see him, although that meant he'd have an easier time keeping track of the shadows too. Maybe we could use that to our advantage? We could hide in the shadows, he could not. Or rather, he couldn't stay in the shadows. If he zipped in and out of the trees on the other side of the clearing, he'd be too far away for me or my shadow to catch up to him in time. The main problem, aside from the whole he's a massive troll who lives off the pain and suffering of others thing, was that Kakashi Hitaki was fast. As expected, all jonin were. But seeing him move against Naruto, or rather, not seeing him move, put him in a completely different league of his own. Even with his legs chained together he could probably still dance circles around the 3 of us. Cagemane was faster than Ino's mind control, but it wasn't that fast. Besides, he knew I was a Nara. He would be expecting the Cagemane. But that really was the only choice we had, wasn't it? Physical traps wouldn't work against him. I was high chunin level in that respect, thanks to my mom, but even a jonin wouldn't help me against this guy. There were very few problems that couldn't be solved with a simple kawarimi. As Kakashi had just demonstrated. Besides, having a bunch of Naruto swarm him wouldn't work. I could latch onto the wrong person by accident, with so many shadows close together. No. Wrong. There was always more than one way. I just hadn't found it yet. We didn't have to rely on Cagemane. We should use it, since it was a good technique that I had experience with. But that didn't mean that it had to be our trump card. No shinobi should ever be completely reliant on one technique or tool. Just what else did we have under our belts? We had to have something. I refused to believe that this problem could not be solved. Ino's mind control jutsu? I tossed that one out right away. That one wasn't useful for combat situations. And for God's sake, no hand-to-hand combat. since Kakashi could, apparently, poke Naruto further than we could throw our weapons. I wasn't going to be dumb enough to try that a second time, not after Naruto had already gone through so much pain to show the rest of us that that was a very bad idea. Wasn't there anything we could use? Of course. Academy techniques. That was it. They taught those things to us for a reason, right? Clone. Henge. And Kawarimi. Of course. It was a simple one, but it was the fastest technique out there behind Shunshin and long-range teleportation. If someone managed to substitute with one of the bells, of course, it would require a great deal of precision, and we'd have to make sure that one of us would be in the right place to pick it up. In order to do that though, we'd have to maneuver Kakashi into the right position, and keep him still just long enough for the switch to take place. And then we'd have to distract him from our true intentions. Then we wouldn't be relying on the cage main after all. Kakashi would be expecting me to use my cage main to trap him somehow. I'd exploit his expectation then. Ino would be the best person to make the switch. Out of the three of us, she probably had the best chakra control. The mind possession jutsu required more control than shadow possession, since it actually delved directly into the mind, whereas shadow possession was mostly superficial and left free will intact. The human brain was a very delicate thing, and turning a target's brain into a pile of completely unreadable mush, because you used too much chakra was rather poor way to start an interrogation. Now the question of how to hold the target still for long enough. Ino had decent aim against moving targets, but it was ridiculous to expect her to hit something she couldn't even see. On that note, if we used too many of Naruto's clones, they'd obscure her vision just as much as they impeded Kakashi's movements. About 10 would be good. They'd have to give Kakashi a rather wide berth though. I could feign using Naruto's clones as conduits to extend my own shadow, and then chase him to Ino's direct line of sight. And maybe get another Naruto clone to be ready to receive the bells when she switched. Yes, this could work. Kakashi's fingers closed around the bells, and he straightened. Now, he was lecturing a still-trapped Naruto about looking underneath the underneath. I'd only have a few seconds to communicate my plan. Hopefully it would be enough. Scanning the clearing, I managed to find Ino, and my shadow snaked out to grab hers. I wrote in the dust, "He'll probably come after you next, since you gave away your position before. When he does come after you, hold him off for a bit and then pretend to be defeated, got it? I just need." I paused to do a mental calculation. 60 seconds to tell Naruto his part of the plan, okay? I trust you can hold him off for that long. I'll send a Naruto clone over to help you later. We have to work together for this. It's the only way we have a chance at beating him. I looked up, Naruto was alone again and Kakashi was gone. Hopefully he hadn't gotten to Ino yet. I hastily scratched out my message and kicked dust over the remains with the heel of my sandal so that no one else could read it, then let go of Ino's shadow, so I could sneak over to Naruto and cut him free. Of course, Naruto was ecstatic to no longer be upside down, and when Naruto was ecstatic he was also very exuberant. And loud. Very loud. SHHH. Okay. I have a plan. K, what is it? There's 2 parts to it. Can you make another solid clone? Quietly. Naruto nodded, and a second one puffed into existence. Right, I nodded at original Naruto. Kakashi is going after Ino now. She'll be distracting him, but she won't be able to hold him off for long. When he comes back, I need you to make more clones and swarm him like this, I said, sketching out a diagram of the training field and our positioning in the dirt. Make sure to leave this gap here, facing Ino. Whatever happens, keep these positions. This is very important. Do you understand? Yeah, but why? I'll explain later, if it works. We don't have much time. Kakashi will be coming back any second now. Just distract him, and get him into this position. Okay? Naruto shrugged. All right. But the bells. We'll deal with that later. 2 is better than none. We're all genin, Naruto. The only way we'll have a chance is if we all gang up on him. We'll figure out the bells thing later. Now, repeat back to me, what are you supposed to do, Naruto? Distract our sensei team and chase him over to Ino's side of the clearing, then swarm him, but leave a gap, right? Right. You ready? Naruto nodded and snuck off into the bushes. All right. Clone. You are going to run off and find Ino. She will lose to Kakashi on purpose, so make it look like you're there to help her, got it? Now, your boss and some other clones will be leaving this gap when they attack Kakashi, right? Yeah. Your job is to tell Ino her part of the plan. She's going to Kawarimi with the bells when she sees an opening, and you're going to grab them. Got it? Actual Naruto and the others are just a distraction. What about you? I'm a distraction too. Okay. So, repeat to me, what are you going to do? He wrinkled his nose. Find Ino, tell her to Kawarimi with the bells when she sees the gap in the clones, and then grab the bells when she does, right? Right. What do I do with the bells? We'll deal with it if we get the bells, I said. All right. All right. All of a sudden, a very Ino-like scream filled the air, and then silence. That's your cue. Go. As soon as the clone had taken off, the mass of Naruto clones exploded out at Kakashi once again. I ran back to the middle of the clearing and started stretching out my shadow, pretending that I was going to get Kakashi from the back while the clones chased him from the front. Naturally, he didn't fall for it, and simply moved out of range. That was when I switched to subterfuge level 2, I retreated my shadow, but only back to where one of the other Naruto clones were conveniently standing. From there, it was all too simple to whip around the clone's shadows. Using Naruto's clone's shadows to lengthen your own, Kakashi commented loudly. Quite clever. But not clever enough. He danced out of reach again, right in front of the spot where he had previously defeated Ino. Now what was the point of saying that out loud? Is he just being flashy on purpose? I thought. But no time for speculation. I wouldn't be understanding this man anytime soon, so there was no point in trying when more important things were going on in the present. The Narutos and my shadow had chased Kakashi right where we needed him. Ino would only have a window of about a few seconds to perform the Kawarimi. It was now or never. A flash of purple from the tree line, and Ino had collided with Kakashi's hip. Get them, Naruto! She yelled. Kakashi jumped in shock. What? But it was too late. The bells were gone. I got them, I got them. Naruto rushed out triumphantly, holding up the little silver bells. You lose, Sensei team. It worked. It worked. I can't believe it, my plan actually. Did I? The three of us faltered. Kakashi had that smile on his face again. You three did well. But it will be a while before you can outsmart me yet. He disappeared with a pop, as did the bells in our possession. We stared in silence. The little red alarm clock hit 12 and started blaring mercilessly. How? And then the alarm clock exploded in a puff of smoke, only to reveal none other than Kakashi Hatake, sitting on the wooden stump as happily as a frog in the rain, the real bells jingling from his belt mockingly. Unfortunately, I know how to use shadow clones in basic academy techniques too. He was the alarm clock this entire time? Chapter 4, The Rusty Kunai. Genin are so cute, Kakashi thought from his stump. Seriously. He almost felt a little bad watching his new team's crestfallen faces. Almost. The plan had actually been a good one. And it might have worked, if he hadn't taken the extra step to cheat. Then again, if he hadn't suspected that Shikamaru might have been able to come up with a good plan, he wouldn't have bothered holding himself in a henge to look like an alarm clock for so long in the first place. Hey, he had to make it a challenge somehow, and since they had already figured out the whole no splitting up the teams once they've been formed rule on the first day, that threw his original setup out the window. Besides, losing to a batch of fresh genin from the academy was kind of embarrassing, wasn't it? Even if there were 3 of them coming at you at once. Plus, staying in one position for all those hours was not easy. Really, that was an amazing accomplishment in and of itself. Maybe these kids would be good for him. He was their sensei, after all. He had to always be one step ahead of them, at least until they finally reached an age where it was actually socially acceptable for them to surpass him. Though it was a bit embarrassing to admit, Kakashi had sort of slacked off after leaving ANBU. And it wasn't the physical aspect he was referring to. The kill-eat-sleep-train zombie cycle of his teens had not been healthy, it was the mental cycle as well. Though getting away with acting like a complete and utter jerkass was hard work, you could only exercise so much of your mind doing it. A genius, a mind reader, and the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox. He wondered just exactly how much these kids would let him get away with. "So, I have good news and bad news," he said. "Oh, God," Ino muttered, sliding to the ground. "Please kill me now." "You don't even know what it is yet," Kakashi said, feigning hurt. "Bad news first?" Naruto tried. "First, let me ask you, do you know what the point of this test was?" Kakashi asked them. They stared at him blankly. "To see if our skills were up to par?" "What sort of skills?" Kakashi asked. "Things." "What sort of things?" "Stuff." "Ah, crap, Hataki," he chided himself. "They're learning. How about this? Why do you think I only had 2 bells, and threatened to send one of you back to the academy?" He tried. "Reasons?" "What sort of reasons?" "Things." "And what sort of things?" "Stuff." Was this how other people normally felt, talking to him? Oh well. You learn something new every day. "Look, just because I'm a Yamanaka doesn't mean I can read minds," Ino said, putting her hands on her hips. She paused. "Well, I meant your mind. Daddy said you're messed up." "Really? Was that what Yamanaka was telling his daughter?" He needed to try harder then. He had been sure the man had called him totally and irreversibly insane at his last psych evaluation. It was an obvious bluff anyway, Shikamaru muttered. "You're not allowed to split up the teams once they've been formed. You have to pass and fail us together. That's how things work. And even if you were allowed to split us up, the test would still be impossible alone. You're a Jonin. We're Genin. The only reason why you'd give us an impossible challenge is if you wanted us to figure something out." "Wait," Naruto interrupted. "So, were we or were we not supposed to work together?" Kakashi sighed, deciding that dancing around the topic was too much of a waste of time. Not that he had much else to do at the moment. "Yes, Naruto. The whole purpose of the test was to see if you guys could work together. Fighting me, defeating me, getting the bells, whatever, that was just a ruse to drive a wedge between you guys. Naturally, since you saw through it before the test even started, it was exceptionally easy for you. The previous teams, on the other hand." "Previous teams?" Naruto asked. "They've been giving me teams for years now, and every year I give the same test, and every year up until now they've all failed. Because they put themselves before the team." "But why?" Shikamaru asked, baffled. Surely they realized that it was impossible for them to win in a one-on-one fight? I mean, no offense, Naruto, but even you realized that you couldn't beat him alone after some point, right? Naruto shrugged. "Sure, I guess." Kakashi shrugged. "Not everyone is as smart as you are, Shikamaru. Or maybe they knew on the inside, but they still thought they had a chance anyway. But why would they do that when working together is so much easier?" "Because unlike you, they actually fell for my lies. They actually thought that one of them would have to go back to the academy, and so, they turned against their own teammates, instead of the more logical decision, that I, as a stranger and a jonin, was a more dangerous opponent than their classmates of the same level. Kakashi shrugged. Plus, you know how they try to balance out the teams. Every year, I'm always the guy that gets the team with the Rookie of the Year and the dead last. So there's always that one guy who thinks that he's better than everyone else, therefore simply treats the other two as dead weight. I'm glad to see that you're an exception though, Shikamaru. But that was expected. Shikaku Nara was a wise man. He wouldn't have spoiled his precious little clan genius into thinking that he was God's gift to man. Oh. Kakashi rubbed his chin. Now that you mention it though, that could have happened this year. What are you talking about? Ino asked. Sasuke, probably, Shikamaru answered. You know how he treats Naruto. And the rest of us, actually. But never mind that. Ino looked at her teammate, and Kakashi saw a flash of guilt flickered across her face. Oh. Kakashi smiled at them, and for once it wasn't one of his infamous "I am trying to make you angry on purpose" smiles. It was only day 2, and they were already infinitely better than he, Rin, and Obito ever were. Seems like the academy was actually smart this year, and didn't put the two classic rivals together. That would have been hell on earth. Shikamaru shrugged. It's okay, Ino. As long as we're on a team together, we won't have to worry about any of that. That means you too, Naruto. Wait, Naruto interrupted. So does this mean we pass? Kakashi responded cheerfully, of course. From now on. Ha! Take that. I, the great Naruto Uzumaki, am now a ninja. Fear me in my ow. That hurt, Ino. Stop being so loud. Ino scolded him, brushing off the lid of her bento where she had whacked Naruto over the head with it. Shikamaru gave her a sarcastic glance, and started poking at his own box of rice. But you really mean it? You're our sensei now? That's right. Now eat up. You've already had a long day, and missions start tomorrow. Yes. Missions. What will it be, Kakashi-sensei? Are we going to be rescuing princesses and now? They're called D-ranks, Naruto. It's nothing to get excited about, Ino sniffed. What's a D-rank? Naruto asked, rubbing his head. Oh my god, Naruto, how can you not know? Ino sighed exasperatedly, and Kakashi watched in amusement as she started detailing the entire mission ranking and organization structure to the poor overwhelmed boy. You have to know this stuff, Naruto. You're on our team now and I won't deal with you slacking off. How do you ever expect to become Hokage if you can't even rank missions? That's a major part of the job description. Do you even know what the Hokage does? Or were you asleep for that lesson too? That's it, Naruto. As soon as we finish lunch, you are coming to my house and you and I are going to learn everything that you clocked out on during your 6 years at the academy, and Shikamaru, I expect you to be there too, because he's our teammate, and I won't have him lagging behind it. Kakashi was still smiling as they sauntered away. If they thought his D-ranks were going to be boring, they had another thing entirely coming their way. The Yamanaka compound, that afternoon. Ino didn't know how she was supposed to feel about Naruto. He really was a nice and well-meaning kid, but he was so annoying. If Naruto wasn't going to start shaping up sometime soon, they were all going to die. Literally. That boy was going to get himself killed someday. She would have preferred Choji to Naruto, since Choji actually knew what he was doing. Plus he wasn't so loud. Yeah, she knew she could be loud too, but she wasn't loud all the time like Naruto. And when she yelled, she actually had a reason, such as someone being dumb, like Naruto. Not Naruto, who just bragged about becoming Hokage for the heck of it. But she supposed things could be worse. Sakura was stuck on a team with dogs and bugs. Not that there was anything wrong with dogs, but Kiba was almost as annoying as Naruto and Shino was just weird. He wasn't a bad guy, but he was, weird was the best way to describe it. With all the bugs and stuff. Not good. Ino didn't like bugs. They were creepy. Meanwhile, the one girl in the world that wasn't in love with Sasuke was the one who got to be on a team with him. How unfair was that? Ino wasn't stupid, she saw the way Hinata blushed inside at Naruto every day. Now, why she had a crush on Naruto of all people, she didn't know. Well, he was kind of cute, but in that annoying little brother that you wouldn't look twice at if your mom didn't make you look after him all the time way, but she did know that it was pretty much obvious to everyone except Naruto himself. Poor girl. And she was too shy to even approach the boy directly. And a direct approach was the only way to get through to a blockhead like Naruto. In an ideal situation, she would have Sasuke-kun on her team as well, but since she already had Shikamaru, that wouldn't be fair. Shikamaru wasn't too bad. He wasn't dreamy like Sasuke, but he was all right. Objectively speaking, he'd be in 7 out of 10. Of course, she couldn't think of him in the same way as she thought of Sasuke, because they were childhood friends, and that was just kind of weird, but whatever. Shikamaru was a decent person, kind, respectful, hardworking, and smart. He wouldn't have any trouble finding a girl in the future, and if he did, then Ino would be there to set him up. To be honest, before their giant fight, she had always imagined Sakura and Shikamaru ending up together. They were really alike, and Sakura was a smart girl once she got over the whole large forehead thing. But no, she just had to go and drive a wedge between them. After all those years of Ino protecting her from Ami and her posse, Sakura just broke their friendship. Over Sasuke. Ino had been willing to compromise and set her up with Shikamaru. But no. Sakura refused to settle for anything less than Sasuke. Maybe it was kind of her fault too. She didn't blame Sakura for wanting to get out under her shadow and find her own way. And she didn't blame Sakura for wanting what she thought to be the best guy to herself. She just wished that they didn't have to become enemies to do it. Maybe a few years down, when times had changed and they got a bit more mature, they'd be able to negotiate over this whole thing again. Dealing with boys was such hard work. Ino sighed as she pushed another practice book problem at Naruto. How he made it past first grade she didn't know. He still had trouble reading kanji and performing basic arithmetic, 2 things that were absolutely required in order to master more complicated jutsu theory later on. Glancing back at Naruto's paper, she realized that he had put as 3 times 4 as 18. You did it wrong. She yelled. 4 plus 4 is 8 plus 4 is 12. It's 12, not 18. 3 times 6 is 18. Ugh, okay. Naruto winced, hastily fixing his answer. You don't have to bite my head off. Sheesh, what are you, my mother? Ino was about to retort to that when she remembered that Naruto didn't have a mother. Then she realized that everything she knew about reading and writing and math, her mother had taught her. Much of what she learned in the academy, she had already learned at home beforehand. The academy spent very little, if any, time on basic reading and writing. When you walked into that classroom, and they started jumping into all that theory and history, they expected you to know all that stuff on your own. And Naruto, of course, knew none of that, because no one had been there for him. No wonder he had so much trouble paying attention. He didn't understand any of the things they were throwing at him. Now she felt bad for yelling at him all the time. Yeah. That's right. I am your mother, she told him with finality. Now buckle down, mister. Because I won't have you dragging down our team just because you don't know that 3 times 4 is 12. Gaha. I'm sorry. Naruto wailed. On the other hand, if that was the only way to get him to concentrate on the important stuff, then she'd yell at him all she wanted. She was sure that if Naruto's mother, whoever she was, had been alive, she'd be yelling at him just as much too. A bar in downtown Konoha, that night. There wasn't anything particularly special about this place, but it was one of the 2 favorite hangouts of the Jonin circle of Konoha anyway. Dubbed the Rusty Kunai in faded red paint, the man who ran it apparently was a veteran who had been disabled in the Third Secret War, and as such fellow shinobi, and their friends often came by to pay their respects. Since today had been Genin testing day, it meant that the place was a bit more crowded than usual, as the younger Chunin and Jonin who hadn't been a part of the Third War dropped by as well to catch up on the latest gossip. Irika Yumino was one of them. The final team assignments weren't due until tomorrow, and he was dying to know if little Naruto had passed. Apparently, the man he had unwittingly assigned the poor kid to was the most ruthless tester of all of them. He hoped that they were all right though. If what Genma had said was true, then maybe he had a slight advantage. Unless Kakashi Hatake had requested the boy for less than friendly reasons. But no. No self-respecting shinobi would stoop so low as to get petty revenge on a genin, even if he was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, right? He tried not to think of Mizuki. Speaking of which, the man had entered the bar now, his tall shock of silver scarecrow puff clearly standing out against the rest of the dark-haired crowd. Hey, Kakashi. How was it? Asuma Sarutobi, the Sandame's son, he knew that, asked. Kakashi shrugged, and there was a collective disappointed groan from the mass of people. Oh, not again, Hatake? That makes this, what, the fifth team you failed? Irika's heart sunk. They passed, Kakashi corrected him, sliding onto a stool and, in the process, pushing Irika off of it. Slightly stunned at first, and then indignant, he stood up with a disgruntled huff and attempted to reclaim his seat, only to be stopped by another regular. This the first time you've been here, kid? 1, I have a name, and 2, what's it to you? Look, that guy's stolen my seat before too. Don't bother. It's not going to work. Once he's planted his ass on something he'll be superglued to it until he decides otherwise. Asuma snickered. Irika gaped. Kakashi ignored him. What sort of jerk was this guy? The wide-eyed Chunin glanced around the room, trying to find somewhere else to sit, only to realize that there were no empty seats. Probably the reason why Naruto's new teacher had edged him off his own in the first place. He hoped Naruto wouldn't be learning any bad habits from this guy anytime soon. Come to think of it, he actually knew him from his mission reports. Yes, that was right. Kakashi Hatake, the guy who always turned in his mission reports at least 3 days late and purposefully made them nigh illegible. Did this guy exist solely for the purpose of making other people angry? Contrary to popular belief, the man interrupted, I actually don't exist solely for the purpose of making other people angry. Before Irika could wrap his mind around that, Asuma Sarutobi had interrupted with a highly sarcastic, really now? Oh, all right, Hatake admitted. Just most of the time. Which, mind you, is extremely different from all the time. Extremely different? Really? Yes. Extremely different. For example, would you rather your heart was beating all the time, or just most of the time? All right. You've got a point there. Wait, sorry, did you say you passed a team? Jinma interjected, getting them back on topic. At that moment, the little circles of gossiping shinobi suddenly all merged into one giant conglomerate, centered on their group. Wait, so Naruto had passed? Yep, Kakashi answered them, lifting a bowl of sake to his lips. The atmosphere in the room tensed. Then, just before he was about to take a sip, he paused and lowered the bowl to the collective disappointment of everyone in the room to add, they actually figured out the trick. He lifted the bowl to his lips again, then paused and brought it back down. And they almost got the bells, too. Finally, he reached for his mask, while bringing the bowl up at the same time, before letting go and bringing the bowl back down. Oh, for fuck's sake! Some purple-haired lady in a tan trench coat screamed. She smashed something on the ground, was that a camera? And stalked out of the bar, fuming. What's going on? Irika mouthed to a scarred man standing next to him. Mask, the man mouthed back. Irika raised an eyebrow. The man clarified, everyone wants to know what's underneath it, but all he ever does is dick around and lead us on. Irika raised an eyebrow, and then returned to his drink. Whatever. I don't care, and paused mid-thought, only to realize that all of a sudden, he was curious now, and damn it. He hadn't had a problem with any of that before until someone had mentioned to him that. By the way, Kakashi suddenly said out loud, did you know that you can actually see your own nose? Your brain just cancels it out automatically. Most people don't even realize it's there until I point it out. Ha, you're right, Asuma said, going cross-eyed, as did the rest of the people who heard him. And then 3 seconds later, damn it, Hatake. Now I can't get rid of it. Iruka suddenly realized that yes, there was this thing called a nose right in the middle of his field of vision, and no, it wasn't going away. Fuck you, Hatake, Genma muttered. Kakashi Hatake smirked. You're welcome. What a jerk, Iruka muttered. You don't even know half of it. Hatake snickered, then brought the bowl back up, only to bring it down again. At this there was an audible groan coming from everybody in the bar, and before you ask, it's Naruto Uzumaki, Shikamaru Nara, and Ino Yamanaka. Oh. That kid. The Nara that actually tried, Genma snickered. You should have heard the headache Yumino had over him. I'm right here, you know. Iruka yelled. I know, Yumino. That's why I said it. One of the many Nara family members sighed. Still don't get why Uncle Shikaku chose Aunt Yoshino of all people. And now we see the result of their unholy union. So, what did he do? Yeah, Hatake, what did he do? I'm more interested about the Uzumaki boy myself. Still can't believe he passed. He's not a bad kid, Iruka protested. Troublesome, but not bad. Careful with that word, or people will think you're one of us. Iruka glanced at the random Nara cousin that had just popped up by his side. Bad? No, troublesome. Maybe he secretly is. He's got the hair for it, another Nara said, poking his ponytail. Iruka hastily ducked out of the way. Might as well call the rest of the pineapple heads here, how about that? Who are you calling a pineapple head? I'm not calling you anything. Just saying that you can't hold your liquor, is all. Oh. Damn it, Fujiwa, you're as dumb as an ox. What did you say about me? He said you're as dumb as an ox, Fujiwa. No, I didn't. I said you're as smart as an ox. Oh. Okay. That's better. It seemed like quite a few patrons had already been here long enough to get just a bit tipsy. One of them stood up and fell over, and had a friend not caught him in time, he would have chipped a few teeth against the floor. As his friend dragged him away, Iruka realized that there was now an open seat, and started edging past the crowd to get to it. So how are they? Asuma asked, scooting backwards a little bit so that Iruka could get to a recently vacated chair. Alas, it was not to be, for just when he had made it past him, someone else had taken the spot, and he was left standing in the middle of the room again. They're good kids. They get along. Of course, I'll have to do something about their clothing choice, Kakashi muttered. Orange. Orange. What the hell was the Sandane thinking, letting him run around in clothes like that? He's already blonde. He suddenly sat up straight, as he realized, I've got 2 blondes on my team, Asuma. They'll stand out like fireflies. Help. I'm sure they'll be fine. You have white hair, and you're still here, aren't you? Yeah, I suppose. Sakura has pink hair, if your misery wants company. And she wears red, a woman in a dress of bandages spoke up from behind Asuma. And all this business with using 3 different types of conditioners. I don't know what it is with Kunoichi these days. All she ever seems to talk about is dieting and looking pretty for boys. Ah, yes, Kakashi muttered. That too. If we're going down that train, then I suppose I should complain about that big red target sign on the back of Sasuke's shirt. He refuses to cover it up too. Something about his clan and whatnot. Asuma knocked back another shot glass. Not that the big red swirly mark on the back of our flak jackets are any better, I guess. Have you tried telling him that those shirts were only for wear inside the village? The woman, Kurenai, asked. Anyone who remembers the Uchiha clan knows that all of them, even Fugaku, covered up on outside missions. Asuma reached for another shot glass and started complaining something about stuck-up little genin, who don't know what's good for them. Irika half-heartedly listened to the newly minted Jonin sensei complain, truthfully, unfortunately, about the young students that he had worked so hard to train. He wondered if he should just move, when just then, another seat opened up, on the other side of the room, near the door. Irika took this as an answer, yes, and this time, he was determined to get to it before anyone else did. To be honest, I'm seriously worried about Sasuke, he could hear Asuma saying. He's skilled, but he's got terrible team dynamics. Is he just antisocial, or does he actually go out of his way to hurt people's feelings? Kurenai asked. Because if he's just antisocial, he doesn't do it on purpose, I don't think, but, well, he's blunt. And Hinata's a sensitive girl. He doesn't go out of his way to hurt her on purpose, but he definitely makes it clear that he doesn't respect her. He considers Choji to be quite beneath him too. He works hard to hone his skills, at least, but he doesn't seem to appreciate the fact that his teammates are also doing the same thing. At last, Irika had reached his new seat, and was just about to settle down onto the cushion to relax when my great and esteemed rival. I hear rumors that you finally passed a Genin team. Is this true? Then let us rejoice. And one day our teams shall compete in a contest of youthfulness. And Irika Yumano found himself wobbling back in his original seat, courtesy of a Kawarimi. The door to the bar was swinging emptily on his hinges. That jerkass. Hataki? Asuma Sarutobi gave him a sympathetic look. Hataki, he confirmed. My dear and cherished rival. But where are you going? Cheers, Asuma nodded, pushing a shot glass at him. Irika took a good, long look at it, and then decided, what the hell, and emptied it. You think Naruto will be okay? Irika asked, feeling the burn of liquor on his throat. Kid, no one in our profession's ever okay, Asuma replied bitterly. But yeah, he'll be okay. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.